I'm with John and Mary here in Canada. Now, Mary, what are you actually doing here in Canada?
Well, we're here because we believe that God has called us to come here. We were originally from England, and we ran a college in England for 18 years, teaching things like computing and accounts and stuff like that. And that business was always kind of on the edge financially, but just breaking even. And then an amazing thing happened. The government introduced training vouchers so that people could pay to have their training wherever they wanted. And because we built up such a good reputation over 18 years, because we used to teach people in small groups, it meant that many people decided that they would come to us for training. So all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is now going through the roof. And I was praying, the logical next step would be to take on more rooms in this building that we were renting, and perhaps more bank loans, get more equipment, more computers to deal with the increased demand. And I was just praying about this one day and thinking that's the right way to go. And I was just walking through our building, and I walked into this room, which wasn't ours, but I was just praying, God, is this going to be our room in the future, an extra room that we could use? And as I walked into the room, it just struck me that someone had totally emptied that room, and all was in there was these 5 big posters. And these posters said, Canada, 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 Canada. And it didn't mean much in itself, but it seemed to be it's kind of a strange experience after just praying that. It was almost as if I could hear the message coming through, no, this isn't your future. You're not going to be continuing with this. You're going to be moving to Canada. Anyway, I just held that in abeyance and carried on throughout the day doing my different jobs. And I went to the bank, and I stood in a bank queue. And my mind just got wandering, and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be strange if we went to Canada? We'd have to have a farewell party for all our family and friends. And the man stood next to me in the queue at the bank was actually saying to the lady stood next to him, we're having a farewell party this weekend. We're leaving. Would you like to come? So I thought, that's strange. She's saying something that I'm thinking in my mind. But anyway, never mind. Got through the bank, and then carried on rushing through the town like I usually did, doing lots of jobs. And then this lady just suddenly appeared in front of me, and she said, you've got, music is important in your life, which struck a chord because I am musical, and you're going to be going abroad to a distant country. And then she said, and would you like to buy a crystal? So I said, oh, I don't believe in that sort of thing, because being a Christian, I saw that as a very new age and not really the way that God deals with us. But anyway, I just carried on walking through the town, and I thought, what did she just say to me? And in the light of the previous 2 episodes that had happened, I thought, all within an hour, I thought, is God trying to get my attention? Is he saying something here? So I just became a little bit paralyzed. I felt like I couldn't carry on with the rest of my jobs. I went back to work and said to Philip these 3 things that had just happened, which were quite strange. So then would you like to come in there and...
Well, then we had, for 2 or 3 weeks, we just kept seeing Canada, 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 Canada. An example of it, I was driving the car, and I was just getting home, and I could see our house up on the hillside. And I switched the radio on, and it was the BBC News. And the man said something like, there are just 3 countries in the world that use women in frontline troops. Canada, Israel, Malaysia, and Canada. Yeah, I said Canada twice, haven't I? I said, yes, you have, mate. And when I got to the house, Kim had just listened to the same thing on the radio, so she was laughing. So I knew I hadn't imagined that the guy on the BBC had said that. And just everybody just kept mentioning Canada. We were in a pub with somebody, this old guy, and I said to him, flaming Jew, look at this weather. And he said, oh yes, and in Canada. And I said, why do you mention Canada? And he said, oh, my brother lives there. And then I was in a craft shop, and there's a young lady, and there's some music playing, and I said to her, oh, is this Sheryl Crow? And she said, yes, it is, and in Canada, blah, blah, blah. And I started to think, have I got Canada written across my forehead?
So you really felt like God was actually calling you to Canada? So
this kind of thing went on intensely for 2 to 3 weeks. Wherever we were, whoever we spoke to. Just the message Canada just kept flowing. So we really decided that God must be trying to get our attention, and that perhaps the best thing to do would be just to take a holiday in Canada and see what transpired from that. So we set about doing that, and we came here for a holiday in 2002. And after that, continued to do some more research on the internet and narrowed it down as to where God was actually calling us to be in Canada, which is in the Gulf Islands on the west coast. And then we set about putting in our application to emigrate. Yeah, and the strange twist with the business was the government pulled the plug on this special scheme that they were doing, handing out these training vouchers. So all of a sudden they did that because there'd been fraud in the system. So our business kind of went from very high to very low almost overnight. And so if we had have gone the route that I was originally thinking of, getting out more bank loans and assets, we would have been in very serious trouble. And in fact, a lot of private colleges did go under as a result of that. So we actually got to the position where we were struggling to keep open then because of this dramatic drop. But because we'd had the call to come to Canada, we knew that that was the next thing on the horizon for us. So we were trying to work out when would be the best time to close the college, to be fair to all the students who were going through exams. And we decided the best time would be the last day of June in 2003. Anyway, our landlords called a meeting. They knew nothing of our call to Canada. We were keeping it quiet from most people. They called a meeting and said, oh, this building is going to be redeveloped, so we have to ask you to leave. And we've decided that the best date would be the 30th of June. So inside me, I was just like, oh, I'm so excited, because we'd already worked that out, that would be the best date for the college to close. And then he said to us, and because we're asking you to leave, we are obliged to give you twice the rateable value on this building, of the property charges, which amounted to £6,000, $12,000. And because we were struggling to keep the business going for those last 6 months, we'd actually taken out a loan which was interest-free as long as we paid it back within 6 months, and the loan was exactly £6,000. So they gave us £6,000 on the 30th of June. We paid the loan off on the 30th of June. It was just so God's timing. Everything just worked together brilliantly. And then we did a sale and selling off our tables and chairs and things, and we needed a certain amount of money for the landing fee to come to Canada, and we got just almost to the penny exactly that amount that day to cover the landing fee from the sale of the tables and chairs and things. So it was just, we just knew it was God's timing, but we didn't know why. We had no idea. We hardly knew anyone in Canada. We had no job to come to. We had 3 young children. It just all seemed so bizarre and pointless, leaving your business and your family and your friends. But we felt very strongly that it was God's call, so we knew that that would be the right thing to do what God tells you to do. Anyway, we had a leaving party for all our friends, and on the morning of that party, one of our friends was quite prophetic. He was praying for us, and he believed that God gave him a message to bring to us that day, to tell us why God had called us to come to Canada. So it was almost like the Lord was leaving it to He does everything in steps. He says, right, be obedient to me in this call to go there. Right, I can see you've done that. You've put everything in place to go. Now I'll tell you the next step. I'll tell you why you're going. Would you like to say what happened that day then?
Well, we were going to say a little parting piece to our friends, sing them a few Dylan songs, and then give them a parting piece. And we just told them briefly what we've just said now of why we were leaving England. And then I just add the add-on. And apparently we have been told that the reason we're going to Canada is to help the Jews get back to Israel. This was from the message, and there was like this kind of gasp went round the assembled people, you know, sort of affected certain people quite strongly, like a spiritual thing.
So are there many Jewish people here in Canada?
Well, not that we've come across. There are a few. We live on a small island. There are a few there, but we haven't really encountered much of the Jewish community here. We tend to feel that it may be Jews coming from other countries, maybe with the economic turmoil that there is in America right now, that this will probably lead to a move of Jewish people wanting to go back to their homeland. And right now, I understand it's a straightforward process for them. They can apply and they can go. But if there becomes, if circumstances change substantially, it may become difficult for them to go. And I understand that God has set up a lot of safe houses throughout North America to care for these people when the time arises. So we're possibly one of those little lights.
So do you see that there could be in the future a time of persecution for the Jews, so you need to help them now?
Yeah, that's how we see it panning out, yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
And we've been able to buy a small, like a nature farm with quite a few properties on it, and we've been doing them up and preparing them. And so we've got food growing, and we've got places for people to stay. So that's all kind of in place now.
Did you already have a heart for the Jewish people before this happened, or has God started to build a heart for the Jewish people as he's revealed his plan for you?
Yeah, he started to build a heart for the Jewish people. Yeah, it's a new venture for us, definitely. Mm-hmm.
I've always, from being a small child, just seen the injustice of what happened in the Second World War, and felt very strongly how awful that was. And so I've always had that kind of sympathy and apathy for the Jewish people. So now it's just, we now feel we're being directed to do something.
Do you feel like God has a plan and a purpose for the nation of Israel today?
Yes, we do. We're of the opinion that God has not forgotten Israel, and that he has end times plans for them as well as for his body of believers known as the church, the Christian church. I think a lot of Christians have forgotten their roots, their Israeli roots, that we have been grafted into the vine, and that salvation actually came through the Jewish people, that we have the scriptures as a result of them meticulously preserving them through the years. We have a lot to be grateful to them for. And in no way would God forget his people that he originally called through Abraham. And the land as well, he has covenanted the land to them. And I believe, in these end times, he's calling his people back to that land. And one day he will come again when they're ready to receive him.
So what's your prayer finally for the Jewish people, for the nation, the land of Israel?
Well, we would pray that they would recognize that Jesus is their Messiah. Yep, and look to welcome him back.
Okay, John and Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you.